Hello and welcome to my Mars Mantra podcast. Today, in my Mars Mantra podcast, I will introduce you to one of the brightest face in the private sector, the person who made me smile in my stressful job over the last 3 years, not recently, but a few years ago. One of my nicest boss, Dr. Jonathan Parkinson. Hi, Jonathan. How are you?
Hi, Rumana. That was so kind. Lovely to see you. Always a pleasure, and happy to join you today for this conversation.
How is everything with you, Jonathan? I know that we both changed jobs and we are in different places now. So where are you talking from today?
Yeah, it's been a while, hasn't it? I am now working for a small Swiss company called Ecopsis. Um, Happy to be with a small firm that focuses very much on the specific areas where I feel that I can add value, and it's nice to be part of a small team. And also I like working remotely, so we don't have offices. We have some some of my colleagues are in Switzerland and some are in the UK, and we meet up, but it's a lot of the time we're working remotely. So it suits me sort of personally. I've worked quite a bit as an independent consultant as well, so it's sort of a mixture of being independent but part of a company and working as a team. And we're doing some good work. So yeah, quite happy.
That's good to know. And Jonathan's got a lot of experience in solid waste management, humanitarian work, and also working with governments across Asia and Africa in infrastructure and providing sustainable services. And we will hear a lot of interesting stories about, what does sustainability really mean and how can we make a better world, looking about the amount of waste we produced and how to make our world less wasteful. So, in terms of Mars Mantra, as you already know, Jonathan, it stands for motivations, actions, reflections, and sustainability. Mars, not the planet Mars. So, I will ask you the first question, of course, that you worked in the humanitarian sector, so you worked in the not-for-profit sector and then private sector, but you also did some academic work. You've done a PhD. So, where did it all start for you? How did you end up working in this sector?
Yeah, great question. I I suppose, well, I mean, when I was young, I'm thinking back, when I was young, when my sort of, relatives, older relatives, and friends of my parents, when they always ask you, well, so what do you want to do? You know, and I used to say that I wanted to work for WaterAid, which I never have done, actually, but I did apply for WaterAid certainly once. Don't think maybe I didn't get a job.
It's a UK-based charity, right?
But
International charity.
WaterAid is an international UK-based charity focusing on water and sanitation. I did end up working for Oxfam for a few years. But going back to the question, I suppose I was very much interested in environmental issues, and I always have been and always will be. And so it was kind of pollution and then that led me to end up focusing on civil and environmental engineering. But it was really the environmental engineering at university that was interest to me. Frankly speaking, I did not want to be constructing kind of infrastructure. That certainly wasn't my interest. So I found the engineering kind of experience and qualification kind of useful when it comes to sanitation, because that is a type of infrastructure. But the real interest was initially environment, and then when I think it kind of merged more towards public health engineering, and less the environment. And then I suppose as time progressed, you realise that, well, I'm kind of focusing on a mixture of both, really, environmental health. But I felt the combination of the kind of environmental issues and the social issues were very much my sort of motivation. and always have been, and remain so. So, like I say, I'm sort of, that's what keeps me, happy with the work I do. I suppose is trying to work on projects that help contribute towards betterment of the environment, and at the same time, particularly pertaining to public health, the impacts of the environment on communities. I did work for Oxfam, but mainly ended up working in consultancy, which, yeah, I've got used to and I'm happy with. I'm comfortable with that. Yeah, but I suppose for a long time, particularly sometimes I've been working on projects, and I used to feel like I had to defend myself being a consultant. I don't feel like I have to do that now. I'm comfortable with what I do as a consultant, and I don't think there is fundamentally that much difference between consultants and non-profit sector, because, yeah, I mean, you can't be working in this sort of sector really if your primary motivation is monetary. I don't see that much distinction between the people working in this sector as whether they're working for a private sector or non-profit or academics. I think everyone's pretty much converging and on the same sorts of, has the same ethos and motivations, which is, I think, makes it a good sector to be working in.
That's really interesting, Jonathan, because I think that for me, it was also a dilemma when I ended up working in the private sector, because I always wanted to work for the not for profit sector. But once I got in, I saw the opportunities of how you can influence the governments and work in more longer term development projects. So I remember when we were working together, you were working in Sierra Leone, and that was one of the interesting projects which had a lasting impression on me. And also, we worked with the mayor. And tell us about that project. What happened there?
Yeah, that was very satisfying in terms of, I yeah, the issues of solid waste and sanitation, in Freetown, on the peninsula, where Freetown sits in Sierra Leone. Um, I've never been. I don't think I've seen slum conditions which have kind of hit me so hard. Actually, I mean, it was really kind of like, you often hear these sort of questions being raised about slums and should people be living there, and you sometimes hear people saying, well, they shouldn't be living there anyway, sort of approach to, just, well, they shouldn't be living there and they need to move, which is completely implausible, and unrealistic, and not grounded on reality. But I have to say, some of the conditions in the slums, which are right along the coast, I mean, I can't say what the situation is now, but it certainly took me back when I realised that actually the slums were right on the coast, and the slums were building up on solid waste was being used to extend the land. Well, not land, because it's just solid waste, and then people were then building their shacks on top of the sort of mixture of solid waste and some earth. I mean, really risky,
Hmm.
and without any infrastructure at all. And the solid waste dump in, King Tom solid waste dump, and the other smaller sites, which were a mixture of solid waste, um, totally dump sites, it's not landfill at all,
Hmm.
and also, fecal sludge was being, discharged on those locations. So we were working, on a project which the project you were referring to. We were working on a project to identify, and that was for Oxfam, to as a consultant, but working with Oxfam. So even though I was working as a consultant, it was working for the municipality. Our clients were the municipality and Oxfam and other members of the WASH consortium in Freetown, and we were identifying new areas of land, for landfill. We're making recommendations for the rehabilitation of King Tom and the other dump sites, Kissy, I think it's called, and the other one was at Wilberforce. And also looking at recommendations of how to improve the whole solid waste management chain. I mean, it was challenging because, as often the case with consultancy work, it's often not enough in terms of the scale of the problem, and it's always a challenge I find with consultancy to to keep to keep it focused on when you realize that quickly realize there are many other factors which you can't ignore. So it's sometimes you can sort of push back on requests to do more work and say, well, it's not in my terms of reference and I can't do it. But many instances you have to be very flexible and take on board, what essentially is additional work, which wasn't actually written down in the terms of reference when you first agreed to do the job. But it's not in anyone's interest just to sort of frankly refuse and say I can't do that. And this was one particular project in mind because we had a meeting with the mayor, who's an absolutely incredible woman, and I wish there were more mayors around in sub-Saharan Africa, like the mayor of Freetown. And she said, what really is the problem here, Jonathan, is King Tom, which is right in the centre of Freetown and was a real eyesore and a real environmental health hazard locally. And also more recently, we're realising what a contribution these landfill sites have to greenhouse gas emissions, although that wasn't on the sort of radar at that time we were doing the project. And she said, I need your recommendations on the rehabilitation of the dump site. So we had to sort of, like I say, take that on board as well, because it's hard when you're meeting a mayor and they're saying,
no,
I want you to do this. You can't just say, no, we're not going to do it. So, yeah. But that was good.
So
good project.
And
small.
What happened? How long did it last, and what was the impact of that project?
That is one of the frustrations, I think, of being a consultant. And it's sometimes the criticism you get for being a consultant, because you're in a country for a relatively short period of time. And that's, because you're following, the requirements of your terms of reference set by the client. And you're not there on a long-term assignment. You're just in and out. So sometimes you're criticised for that, but not really the consultant's fault. You're just working within the frame of what you've got to do. I mean, Freetown, I haven't been there recently, but it's the city I've probably worked in the most. I've had four assignments in Freetown. And it's only when you pick up bits of information from people who are there on a longer period of time, and it's always gratifying when you get some feedback that somebody refers to a bit of work you did like a few years ago, and you think, oh well, people still refer to that. I mean, that doesn't happen all the time. A lot of the time, your work as a consultant, you don't really have any idea. It's very hard to know whether your work really did make a difference or not, because the client will accept it, take it, and they're busy moving on with other things. And if they've got a specific need to come back to you. I mean, I heard recently we did another bit of job for the World Bank which was a regional assessment of plastic waste in South Asia, which I mentioned that to you, I think, previously, which included Bangladesh as well as Afghanistan, India, Sri Lanka, Pakistan, Nepal. Did I say them all? Yeah, no, I didn't say them all. Anyway, I can't remember them all. There were 8.
Maldives, Sri Lanka.
Maldives. Yeah, Maldives. I did say Sri Lanka. Maldives is the one I was thinking of. I just heard recently that bit of work is finally going to be published. Sometimes it takes a long time to get, and you forget about you do so many bits of work, you forget about these things, and then so it's like when you actually hear that something that you worked on actually going to be published. So watch the space. We should hopefully see this soon on the World Bank website.
That's interesting. But now that you made us more curious about this work, so what did you find out? What's the? I mean, I know what's the situation is. We have informal circular economy. People who pick waste and then they make money out of selling
Mhm.
waste. But that's the only thing we know. But what happens? The environmental impact, and tell us more about what you have learned from that project.
Our main focus, it had quite a macro focus, given it
Hmm.
was a regional assessment. So we weren't looking at
Details.
the detail in insofar as. But what you say is absolutely correct, of course. What we were doing, we're using a model created by UNEP, um, and it's basically GIS based model, um, looking at, gosh, you're putting me on the
UNEP
spot remembering
means.
the tech. The UNEP is the United Nations Environment Programme, and they have a model for tracking plastic waste, and it's basically based on river catchments. So there's a part of the model which is based around the network of rivers going into the sea, and then there's a land-based part of the model where you feed in information about the level of urban development and certain parameters which define the generation of waste,
Mhm.
and many different factors and different types of land use type generate different types of plastic, and then it's related to what's called the leakage, which is mismanaged plastic waste then leaks into the environment, then goes into rivers, and
Mhm.
then gradually makes its way into the oceans. And a lot of that recent work has been financed by the global concern to address marine pollution of plastic waste. So it really, starts from that, and it includes in the model. It starts with the production as well. So it's not just the waste management; it's the whole manufacture of waste. Manufacture of plastic, which becomes waste, and so you don't go out your way to manufacture waste, but in a way you are, in many respects, because if there's no system for managing it, then you are in fact manufacturing waste. And the other part of it is there's also the international trade in
Mm.
plastic waste, and I think you and I'm sure many of our listeners are aware that there is this trade of waste, both plastic waste and I think increasingly e-waste. So countries don't want to kind of accept responsibility for the waste they're producing, and a lot of the Western countries are then looking to other parts of the world to then to actually transport their waste and dispose of it, which is a massive problem in
Mm.
Southeast Asia, particularly. I think, particularly when China used to be a big recipient of a lot of plastic waste, and then they said enough is enough, and we don't want any more of that. We don't want to be the recipient of the world's plastic waste. Thank you very much, and they kind of shut their doors on the plastic waste, and other countries are now taking that on. But it's not a way to manage a global waste
Mm.
problem to just export it to other countries. That's a bit depressing, but there you go. Right, next question.
Okay, Jonathan. So you talked a lot about environmental waste and pollution, but how can we stop it in the first place? We talk a lot about disaster risk reduction and mitigating risks before it happens. So why not we look at into the policy level rather than looking at the end products and how we can solve the problem that we've created? Tough question.
We absolutely must. Yeah, we absolutely must. And that links to my sort of slip, I suppose, when I said manufacture of waste, doesn't it? Because we have to be looking at policies that address the production of waste in the first place. And there are, I mean, even though I was being quite negative, there are increasing moves by the private sector and the corporate kind of entities that are responsible for the production of particularly single use plastic is the major problem, because it's only used once and it's then discarded, and then hence the the mountains of plastic that ends up in the sea. But there are certainly a lot of positive steps either taken by governments. Some of them are a bit knee-jerk reaction in terms of banning single-use plastic, which is all well and good, but
Mm.
it's kind of like a lot of government policies. Sort of sounds good in principle. We're just going to ban it, but the reality it doesn't. It's like banning plastic bags. I think that happened in Bangladesh actually. There was I don't know what the current status is.
20 years ago. Yeah, I mean, I can tell you because 20 years ago and 22 years ago, when I came to England, I was shocked. All the supermarkets were selling things and giving everything in plastic bag, and we banned it. But now, when I go
Mm,
back, it's back again because there was no
it's,
alternative to plastic, so it's back again. And yeah, I mean, now in this country, at least we try to change people's behavior and use other bags. So we do try to do that, but it's not strong enough to be able to tackle the problem.
That's yeah, exactly. I mean, there have been certain changes. I mean, since I've been living here in Epsom, which is south of London, I can remember being shocked by going to the supermarket and seeing people come out with their shopping trolleys just full of or everything in plastic bags, and how many
Mm,
plastic bags they were using. Just incredible, without any excuse. Where in some countries, I mean, Bangladesh, I presume, and other countries where in fact, people often do have a second use of the plastic bags. I mean, I'm not justifying the use of plastic bags, but at least the people who are using getting a plastic bag when they're purchasing something often have at least one
mhm.
other use for it. Whereas in the UK, it's completely, not necessary.
I mean, yeah, this is
So,
it.
but yeah. But to answer your
But yeah,
question, then clearly the solutions are not just. I mean, often people, refer to recycling as a solution. I mean, it's part of the solution, but the evidence does show quite clearly that the amount of recycling globally is not having a sufficient
enough.
enough impact
Mm,
on the scale of the problem, and we have to be looking at reducing the creation of the problem in the first place. I mean, my area of expertise is more on waste management and less on working with the kind of industry to tackle the problem. So I can't talk too much around that. But like you, I recognise that that's really where the problem arises, and there's a lot of and it's a lot to do with consumer demand. I mean, most people here in the UK do think, I believe, that they're buying things in the supermarket which has unnecessary amounts of plastic, even if we're not using plastic bags to carry things home. We're still buying things, and you think you get it home and you unpack it, and it just
lots
seems
of
like an
plastic.
incredible amount of plastic, and most
Mm,
people want there to be less plastic. So the supermarkets, etc., um, making noises about sort of reducing waste, and it's a little bit, but it still seems to be far too
mm,
much, in
mm,
my opinion. Mm.
exactly. So, Jonathan, you talked about the problems and how much we managed to solve the problem. But in your view, which was one of your most rewarding experience, memorable work?
Um, I think what I like, the probably the the assignments I enjoy the most are not so much the ones which are short and producing a
Yeah.
report and then you're submitting to a client and then it's gone. I
Mm,
mean, I find them quite interesting, but they are often, I wouldn't say the most satisfying. The most satisfying assignments I've had are ones where I felt like I've uh, developed a sort of working is on a bit of a longer term assignment, and I've had the opportunity to develop a working relationship with the people that I'm working with in the specific country. So, I mean, the two which are both actually were together. One was as a consultant supporting Border and the CDT, which was what does that stand for? The Consortium for DWATS Development, I think. in Bangalore, India. DWATS is decentralized wastewater treatment system. So, and Border, which is the Bremen Overseas Research and Development Association, something like that, have been instrumental in promoting small scale wastewater treatment systems, not just in India, but throughout pretty much globally. Not in No, in Latin America a bit as well, as actually. So in quite a lot of countries, DWATS Border has been instrumental in promoting DWATS and it's wastewater treatment which is not using pumps and aeration. It's a purely a sort of physical and biochemical system, let's say biological, even though it's biochemical, but it's natural biochemical,
Right.
as opposed to using chemicals. So they've been promoting these systems, and lots of other organisations have been involved in this as well. But I think when I started my work initially as a consultant, working for a company called GHK in London, who don't exist anymore, Border were the organisation that were, the one that stood out as being doing the most work in this area. So I had an assignment as a consultant, basically to provide them with some technical support, and it was very responsive to what their needs were. So I didn't have a very fixed terms of reference saying, go to India and do this. It was more, go to India, meet CDD and Border, and discuss with them what their program is, and basically give them your best technical advice. And I really enjoyed that. And similar to that, when I was working for Oxfam, I wasn't able to continue that assignment, unfortunately, when I joined Oxfam. But similarly, Oxfam, a very different entity, of course. But I enjoyed that. I was working for Oxfam for about 3 years, and I had different relationships with different country offices, and the staff in those offices who were focusing on WASH, and I would visit the countries intermittently, not a huge amount, but I'd have regular, obviously, conversations like this, and in post COVID, of course, this has become very much the norm of working, isn't it? Is working internationally, but everyone having Teams calls, Zooms calls, etc., etc. But what I liked about that, to come back to the point of the question, was feeling like my work was, because I suppose I've never really felt that I was the expert who had all the answers. But it's all, and I've often felt on some of my assignments, well, most of my assignments, if I'm working with a national consultant, a lot of the time, I'm just learning so much from the national consultant, and my job is really just to sort of, well, to add my extra bit, but also in terms of the information, is to bring it together and present it to the client in a way which meets their requirements. But in terms of the actual knowledge and the expertise and the understanding, how can an international consultant who goes to country X in for a 2-week assignment, you're totally reliant on your colleagues you're working with nationally. So it's that combination, really. It's not necessarily providing the answers, but sometimes an international consultant, you can draw from other countries'
Yes.
experience, and to me, that's really what innovation is. It's just offering solutions, not and suggesting ideas which maybe come from elsewhere, and discussing those with your with your counterparts, and just if you feel like you're getting good feedback, then you'll feel valued, and I think that's very satisfying to have that feedback.
That's interesting. And you mentioned that,
So, and then my worst assignment, I suppose, simply, there was given just the frustration of not being able to give as much as you feel like you could, often
Mm,
due to lack of time. Um,
exactly.
so, and it's just, yeah, if I had more time to work on this, then I could do a better job. But you're confined by a limited number of days as a consultant. You're often working on various things, and it's sometimes it's really hard to really give your best to a certain client because it's you just feel like you don't have enough time. So I wouldn't say that it's bad not so factors. It's bad because I don't know.
But that's the nature of the business, isn't it?
It's the nature of the business. It
Exactly. We
is,
don't
yeah.
have
And
any
like I say,
control over it.
no, no,
Mm.
you just get used to it.
And that brings me to
And
the last part, which is about, how you keep yourself motivated and how do you make sure that, you don't get too frustrated? How do you manage the frustration and keep yourself going, being optimistic?
um, working with good people like you, Romana, is certainly one
Oh,
of them.
thank you.
Um, it's certainly and having, I suppose, yeah, just trying to maintain good humour. I mean, I'm glad it's nice of you to comment at the beginning of the conversation that that you reckon that actually that must have come through through our through the work we've did together, because I mean sometimes I think like you, Romana, which is why I'd say we're friends. Is that sometimes it's just being a bit silly, and I'm not saying that either you or I are silly people, but being silly, it's like comedians. I mean, they quite often talking about extremely serious things, but they're making a joke out of it. So it's not being silly, but it's just trying to maintain a sense of humor about things and I feel that that's my way that I can deal with stress and challenges sometimes. And yeah, just and being honest and open and just trying to maintain a sort of lighter edge, and that helps break down, I think, some of those barriers and the tension that arises, which often, frankly speaking, everyone could do without. So why be so stressed about it? You just have to deal with it in your own way.
Well,
But and
next
the other
time when
part,
you're
and
stressed, you listen to this podcast to remind yourself, why are you stressed, Jonathan? Well, I
yeah,
didn't
well,
see
I
you
know
stressed.
it doesn't stop. Or I wouldn't say it doesn't stop me being stressed,
Exactly.
but it helps me manage it. Um, so, I mean, the times when I'm most stressed, I just go completely quiet.
I
I
wish I
can't.
could do that. I do the opposite, as you know.
I can't deal with any kind of
Mm,
communication. It's just leave me alone and I got to be quiet. And as you know, and you've asked about before, and you're aware, music is music is very important to my life. I listen to music pretty much all the time.
you don't only listen,
Um,
you're a DJ.
Yeah, I'm a DJ. So I recently I've got a vast quantity of vinyl. That's and
Mm.
I've had decks for a long time since I was about 25, I think. I've always been an avid music collector, record collector, and then when I was at university, um, I was one of the primary people who established a reggae club. So I've
Ooh.
always liked reggae. One of my first records that I bought or borrowed and then bought was Bob Marley's Rastaman Vibration album, which is just incredible. I mean, and Bob Marley is still, I
Hmm.
think, yeah, just such an icon. And I just really valued the. I love reggae music because it has such consciousness to it and such strong lyrics, but the the singing is there's so many such talented
Mm.
Jamaican singers, and their singing is just extraordinary. I think they're such beautiful singers, and I love the rhythms and the bass of reggae. So massive reggae fan, and I always knew when I first listened to reggae as a teenager, I could envisage me in my old man's rocking chair listening to a bit of Bob Marley. I thought that when I heard Bob Marley, I thought I'm going to be listening to this music for the whole of my life. I listen to all sorts of music, but yeah, reggae is the one which is my sort of go-to, I suppose. But when it comes to DJ recently, I listened to an awful lot of electronic music,
Hmm.
um, ambient, techno, trance, you name it, breakbeat, drum and bass, etc., etc. It's all there. Um, and yeah, and I've recently bought. I did a DJing course last year, and I bought a bit of
Mm.
equipment, which has completely transformed my ability to actually mix. Because one thing I always just found very hard to do was actually get the vinyl to be. If you're going to DJ, you need to get the beats. You need to get the beats playing at the same tempo.
So, have you got any consultancy lined up to become a DJ?
No.
Okay, I will give you the first contract. So, when Mars Mantra book will be launched or a live test show, you will be invited as the DJ.
Okay, that would be lovely. I would love to do that, Romana. So I'd have to think carefully about the type of music that
Of
would
course,
be
Bob
most
Marley, you
appropriate. But I've
already
got.
said.
Okay, well there you go. Then you're right. Well, Bob Marley and
Of course,
some
because
other
it's a
reggae.
global
Yeah,
podcast, so we'll bring all the people who are in this podcast show. We'll bring music from all those different countries.
perfect.